after the end of Cold War, the fall of Berlin Wall, many of us said that it is a transient phase of unipolarity. The world got carried away, much was said, the end of the world. We are looking at what we had gained, the efforts that were made, institutions that were built in the last 78 years when it comes to creating a global architecture which had sovereign equality, justice, and democracy as the foundational principles. What we are seeing today is the unraveling, a very sustained systemic assault coming from the preeminent military and economic power. You use the word or expression, new imperialism. Well, when we look at what has happened since the World War II, those powers which were victors, responsible for anchoring a new global architecture, which in any case was asymmetrical, unequal, and less than fair, if not unfair, especially to the countries of the global south, or the developing countries, or the countries which were for long subjugated, exploited, robbed of their resources, where people were brutally suppressed, and the emergence of these countries after the World War as sovereign, independent nations. It's interesting and ironic that what has happened in the last 8 months is undoing or dismantling the gains of almost 8 decades. WTO is not just an organization. It was meant to be an integral part of a rule-based order. Why? Because the countries of the North, the countries which are still a club of G7, or the countries which were colonizing powers, were forced by the voices of the people of Asia, Africa, Latin America to create new rules for access to markets, sharing of resources, sharing of technologies. Let's not forget that what we are witnessing today, coming out of America, is blatant illegality. Why I say so? First, the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, 1947. Both GATT 1 and GATT 2. 8 rounds of world's negotiations, as President Mbeki would recall. The Uruguay round concluding it. 30 years exactly after the WTO was established. At least creating an institution which provided a fair opportunity or platform to the countries which we now say, and rightly so, as the global south, not only to fight for fairness, but also a dispute redressal mechanism. The fundamental rules were A, the most favored nation status, which is part of GATT, part of WTO, and non-discrimination. President Trump has violated both. A, the commitments of America when it comes to the bound rates. People must understand what are the bound rates and the applied rates, which were agreed to. No country, to my best of my understanding, though we demanded, have stuck to the bound rates. My country may have agreed to bound rates of certain commodities, maybe 85%, 90%, but to the applied rates, maybe 10%. That's the reality of the world. Pre-Trump, decisions, or American decisions, the average MFN rates for trade were 8%. Now they are 15.8%. At the same time, we have to remember that in the period that we are referring to, the global trade has grown almost 43, 44 times, and in value, close to 300 times. That is the reality. So the trade today would be roughly 33, 34 trillion, but the two countries have one-third between America and China, close, almost one-third. Together, they have 11 trillion. The countries which constitute, in fact, a vast majority of nations at the United Nations, more than 4/5 majority, have lesser share, but an important role to play when it comes to global resources. So the challenge that we face is an unprecedented disruption. The question is, I was listening carefully to our esteemed panelists, colleagues, Minister Varna and Apla. It would be a mistake which we'll be making as countries of the world, as sovereign nations, to think that there is a dominant sovereign nation which undermines and insults the sovereignty of other nations. That will not happen. Second, on unipolarity. This was said also in 1990s, after the end of Cold War, the fall of Berlin Wall. Many of us said that it is a transient phase of unipolarity. The world got carried away. Much was said. The end of the world. You remember? But the world as such is multipolar, interconnected, interdependent. There are continents which may be poor because we have a disproportionate share or burden of poverty. Whether it's sub-Saharan Africa or countries of South Asia, 50% of those who are living in extreme hunger and poverty come from these regions of the world. But when it comes to resources and the contribution, historically, the resources have come from where? Africa, Latin America, Asia. So can the world be, you have a disruption which is unprincipled, as I've said, and the actions that are being taken today, less commented upon, is not only the WTO, it's the entire multilateral architecture, which would include the Bretton Woods institutions. We have been fighting our countries that what is this P5 and what is the veto power? Can there be decisions made about all of us, particularly countries of Africa, 54 countries, countries like Brazil, India, without us?